Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism. A lot of people, the big question is, why are they this way? How do they become narcissistic? Well, it's complicated because there's several different pathways, and that's what this series has been taken on. Now, what we're going to be talking today is, and I'm sure some of you have seen this, the idea of the apple doesn't fall from the tree. You haven't known a narcissistic person? Their parents are exactly the same. We're going to call that mirrored narcissism. So let's take that apart. Again, I'm Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this channel, and do hit that subscribe button and join this wonderful community learning about narcissism and where it comes from. So let's talk about this, just calling it the mirrored narcissist, right? It's monkey see, monkey do. Mirrored narcissism is such sort of a simple origin to narcissism. The child observes an entitled, arrogant, mean, selfish parent, and they mirror the parent's behavior. As children, they may very well mirror their parents' behavior with their peers and siblings and just pay forward the bullying that they witness in a parent, sometimes with the narcissistic parent's encouragement. If you have had a narcissistic sibling, they were probably a pain in the neck even when you were kids. And even if it isn't full-on bullying, going into adulthood, it may culminate into entitlement and overall toxic behavior. Some of this relates to something called vicarious conditioning. We learn by watching the behaviors of other people. And in this case, the child is watching how their parent behaves. They're watching their parent kind of be rewarded for their behavior, so that can cement this kind of learning. Now, not all of us will ever get to meet the parents of the narcissistic people in our lives. Certainly as a therapist, I don't get to meet patients' therapists as a rule, right? But if you marry a narcissist or get into a long-term relationship with one, odds are you will meet their parents, and it may be clear as day where the narcissistic person's toxic patterns came from. But like I said, we don't all have the luxury, and not all narcissists had narcissistic parents, right? Now, in some ways, this mirrored narcissism origin is probably an origin that draws out a little bit of less sympathy from us or justification. There's a parent who's an a-hole, they raise an a-hole child who becomes an a-hole adult. If you know the narcissistic person's siblings, you may find out that many of them are actually not toxic. You'll see that it doesn't affect everyone the same to be exposed to one or both narcissistic parents. Golden children and brainwashed ones are obviously going to be the ones who are the most vulnerable to this mirrored narcissism, right? They want to be like this parent. At best, meeting a narcissistic person's parent may give you a moment of clarity, but it's not going to resolve the issue, right? Now you may understand where your partner's narcissism came from. You still have to deal with it. So that clarification of like, now I see why they're like this, still not going to change your day to day. Now, if this is your own parent and you had contact with your grandparents, you may also have a real sense where the behavior came from in your own parent. Again, doesn't pull for much sympathy, right? Because you're like, okay, that's why my parents like this. But it does clear some of the mystery of why is this particular narcissistic person like this. The mystery also of why everyone who is exposed to a narcissistic parent doesn't become narcissistic is an issue I'm actually going to take on in a different video. But the brief version comes down to whether the child chooses to externalize or sort of, in essence, model what they saw in their narcissistic parent and end up behaving like an entitled, arrogant, grandiose jerk, or the child internalizes it and blames themselves, which is what most survivors of narcissistic parents do and look like. Now, the folks who are these sort of mirrored narcissists, that's where their narcissism came from, they often do have ongoing contact with their parent and may not have an issue with their parents, while their siblings really do have an issue with the parents. The mirrored narcissist may even be proud of their parent acting like an entitled person even now, or they are continuing to benefit from their parents' narcissistic behavior. Think Succession, right? Like that. The mirrored narcissist may have fraught sibling relationships with the siblings who are over it and want little to do with the narcissistic parent. This apple doesn't fall far from the tree model may be the most sort of intuitive explanation of the origin of narcissism. The challenge, though, of learning that this is where it might come from is there isn't much we can do about it, right? I get the question all the time, right? Is there anything we can do to prevent narcissism? Not really. If the parent is fine with their own behavior, the child mirrors that behavior, and the intergenerational sort of narcissism game persists. The narcissistic parent rewarded the child when they were younger for mirroring their parents' behavior, and this is going to persist when the narcissistic person is all grown up. When I think about mirrored narcissism, I thought about people over the years I have worked with who are narcissistic. And in a large proportion of cases, I can see the mirrored quality. When I did get to meet the parents, it was so clear. And in this way, it almost leaves everyone sort of clueless about the narcissism in the family system because it's kind of normative behavior in that family, acting like an entitled jerk. In fact, the people in the family who are the ones who are suffering is everyone else, while the mirrored parent and the mirrored child just kind of go along thinking it's normal, invalidating everyone, and they're often quite shocked and then angry the first time someone tells them that they are selfish. Now, when it comes to sort of trauma-bonded justifications, the mirrored narcissists don't pull for justification from the rest of us the way other origins, like trauma or neglect, those kinds of origins do. Because basically it just looks like a generational cycle of parent is a jerk, kid is a jerk, and the beat goes on. To all the parents out there who say that, oh my gosh, I do not want to raise a narcissistic child into a narcissistic adult, look inward first. And always make sure that you do not act and behave in an entitled, demanding, or mean way with other people, least of all in front of your child. Don't berate their soccer coaches, harass their teachers, yell at store clerks, scream at flight attendants, invalidate family members. Some children will mirror this and view it as power and a way to stay safe. So you don't want to show that to them. I also know that this is chilling for folks who are trying to co-parent with a narcissist. But please remember, your child is also having healthy patterns mirrored by you as a healthy parent. In fact, the research is pretty clear. Having one parent who's on it, who's empathic and aware, drops these risks of developing narcissism quite a bit. It's the 1-2 punch of having two parents like this, or one parent who's narcissistic and the other parent who's just detached from the stress of the relationship. That's the issue. I remember when I was thinking about this video when I was on an airplane. And before the airplane, I was in the airport and I was sitting in like sort of that fancy part of the airport. And there were these kids who were hellions, like they were so badly behaved. They were just sort of interrupting people, being rude to people. I mean, just awful, just really monstrous kids. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, if these were my kids, they wouldn't be getting on any airplane. So I was just noticing that, and I didn't think about it again. I went and boarded my flight. And after I boarded, the flight attendant came up to me and actually offered me a seat, an upgraded seat. I was like, oh, that's fancy, great, wonderful, I'll take it. And I move up there, and I couldn't figure out why that happened because we were about to go. And they were taking people off the airplane. And would you know, it was a woman who was screaming and yelling about something, very entitled. Why this rule's not for me? Entitled. And guess who her kid was? The really badly behaved child in the airport. And the kid was probably about 9 or 10 years old. And it stuck with me because I thought, there's the mirrored narcissism. Like this child who it was just basically sort of parroting the behavior. And in fact, even when somebody in that place, in the waiting place, told the child like, hey, yo, you need to slow down, the child spoke back to that adult. And the mother was so entitled and agitated and dysregulated, and you could see how that played out. Ironically, they got taken off the plane, and that was the end of their vacation, and a very comfortable flight for yours truly. So Just saying, when you're watching it in real life, and I'm sure a lot of you can think of examples of people you know, very entitled in their behavior, and may not be happening in all of their kids, but in at least one kid, you see that behavior being replicated. Thanks again.